Welcome to Equip, Build, Mature. Hope you're having a great Tuesday. Today I want to give you a word of encouragement. We're going to continue to look at the idea of following Jesus. We're continuing what we started last week in following Jesus through the storms of life. We should never follow Jesus at a distance. We should follow Jesus and no other. And we are to follow Jesus through the storms that we face in our lives. Last week, we looked at the first principle, timing. When do we follow Jesus in the storms? And today we're going to look at the second principle, the direction issue. Where do we follow Jesus through the storms? We're going to be, again, still looking in Matthew chapter 8, verses 19 to 20. And in verses 23 to 27. So it says in verses 19 and 20 of Matthew chapter 8, "And a scribe came up to him and said to him, 'Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go.' And Jesus said to him, 'Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head.'" See, that man's issue was about place or direction. And Jesus pointed out what the potential directions might be. Holes, nests, nowhere. In verse 20 of chapter 8 in Matthew, Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man to emphasize that he was fully human. As a man, he had no consistent shelter to sleep in. So, as a follower, the man could not expect anything different than what Jesus experienced. Jesus was asking if he could live with that. It is implied that the man chose not to follow Jesus because he did not like the direction. Maybe the man thought that with such huge crowds following Jesus, he must have had huge monetary resources and huge monetary connections. Jesus told him he had no conveniences, and if being with Jesus was enough, the man was more than welcome to follow him. The Apostle Paul explained this reality of Jesus to Jesus' disciples at Corinth in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9. And this is what he wrote: "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you, through his poverty, might become rich." The scribe, back in Matthew 8, the scribe had a problem with the direction Jesus was going in. In the scribe's mind, Jesus was going nowhere because he had no material conveniences. In chapter 8, verse 23, it continues the thought that Matthew started in chapter 8, verse 18. About following Jesus. So as Jesus got into the boat, his disciples followed him. If we follow Jesus on his terms, that means we do not determine when we follow Jesus, or we do not determine where it is he leads us or where we'll go if we're listening to his call. See, following Jesus must be in the direction that he chooses, and it must be at the time he chooses. Sometimes we get that all wrong. In Matthew 8, verses 23 to 27, Jesus was in a boat, sleeping, during a pretty violent storm on the Sea of Galilee. In verse 23 of chapter 8, they got into a boat with Jesus, as they had so many times before. But what they did not know was that Jesus was leading them into a storm. Verse 24 of chapter 8 says that it was, in the Greek, it was a great seismos, an earthquake-like storm, pretty shaky storm on the Sea of Galilee. The waves were huge. The waves were covering the boat, and they were about to take it under. The sea is about 14 miles long and 7 miles wide. So why would Jesus lead his 12 disciples into such a storm? Why does Jesus lead us into life-shaking storms? We follow Jesus, trusting him to lead us to the right place. Jonah's storm was a rebuke for his disobedience. Job's storm tested the strength of his faith in God. Storms come into our lives as either rebukes or tests. The first thing Jesus did after the 12 woke him up in the boat in 8:26 was to rebuke them. As soon as he wakes up, the first thing he did was rebuke them. Then in 8:25, they were screaming and crying. They simply could not understand why Jesus was still sleeping. Did he not care that they were all about to die? He responded, "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" Verse 26 says, he got up, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. After storms hit the sea and then quickly pass by, the waves can continue to be choppy for hours. But immediately after this storm, when Jesus said to be calm, the waves were totally calm. The 12 were amazed. In verse 27, they say, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the sea obey him." See, their scriptures spoke of men who had healed the sick. They spoke of men who had raised the dead. But no one in the scriptures had ever controlled the weather. Only God has power over storms. We follow Jesus into storms because we trust his grace and mercy for us. He leads us and he asks us to obediently follow him. He leads us into the storms and he leads us through the storms. When we get to the other side, he's going to be there with us, as he was when we entered the storm and went through the storm. We learn our lessons. When we learn our lessons, our faith will grow. And as our faith grows, our walk with him will be deeper and stronger. And as we walk with him through the storms, we will develop more of his character. We will embrace the correction he gives us. And we will emerge from the storm more focused and more courageous. In chapter 8, verse 18 of Matthew, Jesus commanded the 12 to get into the boat. I want you to notice what he's saying here. He wanted them to get into the boat so they could get to the other side. But he rebuked them while they were in the boat in verse 26. "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" Remember, before they got in the boat, Jesus told them they were going to the other side of the sea. It was always his intent to arrive with them at the other side. He was not leaving the 12 to die in the middle of the sea. That was never his plan. When they got into the boat, they did not know that they had to go through a storm to get to the other side. When the waves crashed and covered the boat, they should have remembered his words before they got into the boat, that he told them he was going to lead them to the other side. As bad as your situation looks right now, trust his word. Trust his word that you will arrive on the other side safe and stronger. See, Jesus calls us to follow him through the storms of our lives, not to be crushed in the middle of the storm. His purpose is to galvanize our courage and strengthen our faith. I encourage you, trust him. Trust him to lead you through your financial crises, your marital challenges, your health emergencies, your spiritual calamities, your kids' disasters. No matter what storm hits your life, I strongly encourage you continue to follow Jesus through the storm until you arrive on the other side. Guys, thanks for taking some time with me here today. Hope you have a great Tuesday and continue to follow Jesus through the storm, totally trusting him. Take care.